I had posted an ad on Craigslist looking for a handyman to help me fix up a few minor cosmetic issues around the house so I could sell it. I was hesitant about using Craigslist due to its reputation for attracting odd characters, especially as a woman who lives alone, but I just needed someone quickly. The first few responses were not encouraging, but then I got a message from a guy who sounded legit. We messaged back and forth about what I was looking for and how much it would cost, and booked a time for him to come by and start the more minor tasks. Upon meeting him, he seemed nice enough, if maybe a little rough around the edges. Maybe he was from a rough background but was doing better now. I wasn't going to be too picky. This was an internet hire after all, and Craigslist at that. As long as he did the work well and didn't do anything creepy, I wasn't going to worry about anything else. He got to work patching some drywall, and I went about my day working from home. At one point I heard him walking around, which I assumed was him, checking out the other jobs I had mentioned. I heard him go into the bathroom, and he stayed in there for a while. I went downstairs to the kitchen and heard what sounded like him working on something, but saw his tools on the floor near an area he had patched. I paused to listen but couldn't figure out what he was doing, but I did hear what sounded like muttering. I was already a little sketched out having a random man in my house, and I wasn't used to dealing with tradesmen, but maybe that was just part of his process. Nonetheless, something about it didn't really sit right with me. I went back upstairs and got back to work in my bedroom office. I didn't even hear him come up the stairs, but when I took a break to stretch, I heard him make a noise under his breath from the hallway. I whipped around and he was walking past the doorway toward the second bedroom where there was some trim work to be done, and he quickly turned his head when he realized I had heard him. I was grossed out and decided to just pay him for the day and not hire him again. For now, I might as well play nice and let at least some of the work be completed. He left later and I was just relieved to not have to deal with him anymore. I took the ad down and went to talk to my neighbor who was cooking on the barbecue outside to see if they knew any handymen that were less creepy. I was willing to spend the money to avoid feeling strange in my own home. We chatted, and he asked about the work I was having done. And when I told him it was mostly trim and drywall, he seemed confused, saying that he had seen the guy fiddling around near the windows, holding a small device with wires coming out of it. He thought I was having security cameras put in. My heart sank into my stomach and a chill went down my back. We finished talking, and I went back to my house. Once inside, I immediately went to the downstairs bathroom, to the window to see if my neighbor was onto something. Sure enough, I saw a tiny lens poking out the side of the window frame. I was furious, but didn't know what exactly to do, frozen for a moment while I contemplated. Before I could make a decision, my cell phone rang. It was the handyman. Against my better judgment, I picked up. He sounded nervous and said he thought he left a tool behind and asked to come back to get it. I panicked and hung up. Then came a series of rapid knocks on the door and the sound of his voice. He was calling my name. My hands started to shake and I shut myself in the bathroom, sitting down with my back against the wall under the window. Something was telling me to hide. I called the police, praying that I had remembered to lock all my doors. They showed up, but he had already gone. I called the guy my neighbor recommended, and he removed the cameras. I just hope he got them all. I used to make my money completely off of freelance work and cash jobs. I have a wide variety of skills, one of which was cooking. I'd worked at summer camps before, but this place was more like a live in-resort or retreat. I called it a compound because the people who hired me were clearly hippies. They had a huge garden and traded with farms in the area to get any other food they needed. I don't know where they got the money, but they did pay me with cash. I was hired off of Craigslist to make big weekly dinners for people I assumed were the higher-ups of whatever kind of organization was. I worked for them for months without incident, and they always seemed to love the feasts I made for them. One time, though, I was told that they had a particularly important celebration dinner coming up. Something to mark the end of the harvest. I got to work inventorying what was available and what I would need for the menu I was planning. The feast was for everyone in the compound this time, so I had quite a bit of prep work to do as well. I was given a timeline of the evening so I could plan for the food to come out at the appropriate time. There was the usual items on it, like opening speech, musical performance, and so on, but right after the big meal, there was something called the offering. I figured it was some hippie version of a religious sacrifice, like offering a plate of food to some weird altar, and I just kind of laughed it off and planned around it. The night of the feast, I was in the kitchen with the other staff, coordinating everything so that meals came out properly and on time. All the while, we could occasionally hear the sounds of the ceremony in the dining room down the big hallway from the kitchen. There were speeches and music. It sounded quite lively. But at the height of the feast, we heard the music and chatter stop, and the leader of the compound gave a very somber-sounding speech. We all kind of raised an eyebrow at each other, but kept working as we still had to get the desserts and after-dinner coffees and digestives ready to go. Once all that was handled, I left my sous chef in charge and decided to pop down to the dining hall to observe the festivities such as they were with the speaker going on and on. I wanted to make sure the timing of the next course was right. As I walked down the long hall towards the huge double doors, I heard someone clanging a gong, 3 hits followed by a pause, 3 times. Then the chanting started. I slowed my pace to listen better, but it was in another language I didn't understand. Just before I got to the door, the chanting stopped, and I heard the leader shout something about bringing the offering. I stopped in my tracks, feeling a very weird sensation in my gut. There was silence for a moment, and then a blood-curdling scream, and then silence again. My eyes widened and I almost lost control of my bladder. I lowered my stance reflexively, as if I was instinctively preparing to fight or flee. Finally I relaxed, and someone opened the double doors and asked about dessert. I think I came off as normal, since they didn't act like I was doing anything unusual. I was in a trance as I went back to the kitchen to help bring the food out. I didn't go into the dining area itself. I was too scared of what I might see. None of the other staff said anything, so I reassured myself that maybe it was part of a performance of some kind. Who knows with these, right? However, the next few weeks I was there, one of the higher-ups who usually organized the weekly meals wasn't there, and I dealt with one of the other ones. I asked about the one I hadn't seen and was told he had moved on to another side of the organization. I didn't press any further, but that response was so strange, I knew it was going to drive me nuts if I stayed. I ended my employment with them and made a note to do more research on potential clients in the future. I didn't want to accidentally witness anything else I shouldn't. Last year, I needed some extra money after I lost my job, so in addition to applying for regular jobs, I also browsed for casual cash gigs to keep up my stream of income. I found some on Craigslist, one of which was a cleaning gig for an elderly gentleman who needed some extra help around the house. I got the job and showed up one morning to check the place out and go over what he needed. He was a lovely man, very sweet and still very sharp and witty despite being at least 80. He was on the skinny side and didn't look all that strong, so I understood why he'd want help for the more physically involved tasks. He just wanted someone to come over as needed, probably no more than once a month or so, to do the deeper cleaning, since he could still handle the day-to-day stuff on his own. After we talked, I decided to start some of the tasks that I could accomplish with the supplies he already had in the house. As I cleaned, I noticed some odd things around the house, items that couldn't have belonged to the old man. In particular, there were women's clothes in the laundry. I thought they could be his. Perhaps he had a thing for cross-dressing and I wouldn't have judged him for it, but they were far too small to be his. I carried on. I headed towards the back room, but he stopped me and said it wasn't necessary today since he never used that room. It was just storage and the basement entrance. It definitely looked like it. But there was one thing amiss, a small doggy door at the bottom of the basement door. In front of it was a bowl and spoon that looked like they had been used recently. I had zero explanation for this, but it wasn't my job to pry, so I let it be. My client went outside to do some gardening, and I continued on inside, scrubbing the slightly grimy baseboards in the living area just off the back room. As soon as he closed the door behind him, I heard a knocking, a quick tap-tap, but I couldn't tell where it was coming from. It happened several more times, allowing me to locate the source of the noise. It sounded like it was coming from the floor beneath me, in the basement. I knew the old man had told me not to go in the back room, but I figured he might have an animal trapped down there, which could damage his basement and certainly make a big mess if it stayed. He probably couldn't hear it anyway. And if there was nothing there, then he didn't have to know I'd gone down there at all. I turned on the light and went down into the unfinished limestone basement. The first thing I saw was a black utility rug and the edge of a bed. I could hear the tapping sound coming from the direction of the bed, but before I could get a closer look, I heard the old man calling for me. I ran back up, careful not to make too much noise so he wouldn't know I'd be down there, and got back to the baseboards just in time for him to re-enter the house. I was out of breath and I knew he saw it, because he glanced towards the basement door suspiciously. He told me that was enough for today, paid me, and I went on my way. Something was really not sitting right with me, so I went by the house about 2 weeks later to see if I could get back in for another cleaning session and do some more investigating, but there was a week's worth of mail sticking out of his mailbox. I knocked, but no one came to the door. I heard the sound of a muffled voice yelling something, either hello or help. I called the police to do a wellness check, and they ended up finding a woman who had gone missing a few months ago, tied up in the basement. She was in bad shape but would recover without issue, but they never found the old man. I'm just glad he didn't catch me in the basement, or else I probably would have been held there too. So which of these 3 stories did you think is the most creepiest? Make sure to like and subscribe for more creepy stories.